Congressman Andy Harris of Maryland, House Freedom Caucus chair and House Appropriations Committee member. All right, so Congressman, lawmakers, you get back today, 14 legislative days to get the budget done or pass a short-term funding resolution. Where do negotiations stand right now?
Well, Chuck Schumer refuses to negotiate on a reasonable budget. He wants to increase spending. He wants to increase spending a whole lot. Obviously, we can't afford that. We want to hold the line. We'd like to freeze spending. And he may choose not to agree to that and cause a government shutdown on September 30th, but that's up to him.
Yeah, obviously the Democrats are already planning on putting the blame on Republicans if that happens. Republicans are going to need some Democrats in order to get this over the finish line and reach some sort of a deal. This is President Trump moves to claw back nearly $5 billion in funding that Congress already approved. He says cancel it, save the money instead. That's on top of legislation passed this summer that clawed back about $9 billion in foreign aid and public broadcasting funds. Democrats, though, they're outraged, as you just talked about. Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer releasing a statement saying the administration's plan to advance an unlawful pocket rescission package is further proof President Trump congressional Republicans are hell-bent on rejecting bipartisanship and going at it alone this fall. Your reaction to that, sir?
Well, look, we need to freeze spending. We need to lower spending. And if we need to go it alone to do that, then we'll show the American people that we're willing to go it alone. The fact of the matter is that the Democrats have not engaged in reasonable negotiation. They still refuse to tell us how they choose to close a $2 trillion budget gap every year, except through raising taxes. That's all they want to do. They always just want to raise taxes. No, we need to have a serious discussion about how we begin to decrease the overall amount of federal spending and live within our means.
Yeah, Congressman, I have very little doubt that you, the Freedom Caucus, Speaker Johnson, House Republicans will get something out of the House of Representatives. But then it goes to the other side, and it's got to have Democrat votes, which just drives up the price tag. Do you ever see there being a possible compromise where everyone can get kind of what they want, or at least some of what they want?
Well, look, we can try. But again, when Chuck Schumer says, from the outset that we're not going to negotiate, we want to restore, for instance, that foreign aid funding, the wasteful foreign aid funding. Thank goodness President Trump rescinded from this year's budget. You're not going to get very far. So, look, Chuck Schumer's going to have to make up his mind. Does he want to shut the government down or not? And if he does, he'll have to deal with the American people, because it'll become clear that all we're calling for is level funding, literally a freeze in spending in the face of a $2 trillion budget deficit every year. I think the American people not only expect us to freeze spending, I think they expect us to decrease spending. So I think we're in a very reasonable position on the Republican side.
Yeah, another big issue looming over Congress is the Epstein files. Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna and Republican Congressman Thomas Massie, they're working across the aisle to get transparency here. They're expected to hold a news conference with victims today. How soon could we see a vote on releasing the files?
Well, look, I think there's going to be a vote coming up this week or next week on it. We have to be very careful, though. When investigations are conducted, people's names get into those investigations who are never found to be guilty in any way, shape, or form. And, releasing those names, the name of someone whose name came up in an investigation but was obviously not charged, obviously there's no evidence that they have committed a crime, that's a little hazardous. We ought to think twice about that. But, again, if these reports are properly redacted for that kind of information, then I think most people agree that there's no harm. But that has to be there has to be some protection, not only for the victims in those reports, but for the people whose names are mentioned in the reports, but who had no guilt at all.
Yeah, Congressman, real quickly, last 30 seconds we have the House Freedom Caucus, one of the most powerful lobbies there in Congress. Many count on you to cut that spending and fight that fight. You got a lot of members that are not going to be back after the midterms. They're running for other offices, governor, attorney general in some cases. Do you worry about what the future of the Freedom Caucus holds after this upcoming midterm?
Not at all. We're going to have more people who want to join the Freedom Caucus now that they realize that actually some of our leading members go on to higher things in their own states, including governorships, the U.S. Senate. So I think we're actually going to have an easier time getting members to join the Freedom Caucus now.
Information. Truth is freedom. is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.